The Subcommittee on Consumer Protection of the Commerce Committee will come to order. I want to welcome our witnesses and thank the Chair, Maria Cantwell, and Ranking Member Roger Wicker, who is with us, and especially my partner in this effort, Senator Blackburn, whose leadership has been very important throughout our subcommittee process. Today, no less than in our past meetings, she's played an important role, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here as well. Nothing could be more important right now than protecting consumers against the spreading scourge of price gouging and scamming on the internet and elsewhere relating to COVID prevention and treatment products. Connecticut alone has received more than 800 complaints, including one from a constituent of mine in Shelton, Connecticut, Julius Hull, whose son tried to get a test. He needed a test because he was potentially a danger to his older parents. He and his son went to a walk-in test facility, waited in line for 45 minutes before they were told no more tests. They went to another facility, waited for 50 minutes, no more tests. And they were told the only tests left were rapid tests available to purchase for $60. As Mr. Hull put it to me, quote, "We're being told to wear masks, get vaccinated, keep social distances, and get tested if you have any symptoms. We've done this and get hit with a $60 bill. I don't know who put the price of these tests at $60 each, but I believe we're being taken advantage of." Yes, Mr. Hull, you are being taken advantage of. You're being exploited. And what's happening to you is unconscionable. And I would say the same thing to every one of those 800 people who have complained about similar practices. $60 per test is ridiculous. Taking advantage of people by raising the cost of these life-saving products is not only immoral, in most states, it is a crime. State attorneys general are stepping up, bringing cases where they can, but it's a national challenge. And I will be very blunt. There is a glaring lack of enforcement at the federal level. The federal government, including Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice, have few legal tools to hold price gougers accountable. That is a glaring gap in the law that needs to be corrected. I am deeply frustrated and disappointed that federal enforcers have failed to do more, and a large part of the problem is almost certainly lack of sufficient authority. And that's why I will be proposing a measure that will fill that gap, that will enable federal enforcers to do more and protect consumers in Connecticut from these price gougers and scammers. We need to impose steep financial penalties and absolutely bring criminal charges. I've said this in a variety of other contexts. The one thing that these companies understand is prison time and criminal charges. Profiteering during a pandemic is reprehensible. It costs lives. It must end. Last year, the subcommittee held a hearing on scams and fraud exploiting the pandemic. We heard then that the pandemic has created a bonanza for swindlers and con artists. The theft continues. The FTC has received nearly 700,000 reports of fraud since the start of the pandemic, approaching $700 million lost. At each new phase of the pandemic, consumers have been inundated with more sophisticated scams. Online marketplaces are still rife with fake face masks. Sophisticated counterfeits are still infiltrating our supply chain, putting unsuspecting consumers and healthcare workers at risk. And social media platforms are still a mega mall for snake oil salesmen hawking fake cures and prevention measures. It's not small change theft. People are going unvaccinated because of the commercial misinformation from these snake oil salesmen and then contracting COVID-19 and dying. So we've seen a new trend, an entirely new paradigm of fake or deceptive testing schemes during this recent surge. Bogus testing centers have promised quick results and left consumers waiting for days. In some cases, the results are not even real. Again, these scams cost lives. The purpose of this hearing is to sound alarm, raise a red flag, create awareness about the surge of scams, but it's also to ensure that those who steal from consumers and put them at risk are brought to justice. Our consumer protection laws are dead letter if they are unenforced. And the Federal Trade Commission has to do more, has to do better, has to be more vigorous and assertive. It's failed to create deterrence through hefty fine and strict court orders, and it must do more. In December of 2020, Congress gave the FTC new legal tools to help bring stiff financial penalties against fraud. I want to recognize Chair Cantwell's substantial leadership on that law, which I was pleased to help lead. We urged the Commission to fight harder. We gave it more funding. Last year, the acting director of the Bureau of Consumer Protection told us that it had, quote, cases in the pipeline, end quote. And yet the FTC has brought 2 cases in the last 10 months since that hearing, 3 in total under the new law. However, the FTC continues to issue warning letters that are nothing more than a notice and not even a slap on the wrist. They don't rise to that level. Again, this fraud, this undermining of our pandemic response is happening because there are nearly no consequences. The burden is falling on consumers. These bogus testing centers, counterfeit face masks, and deceptive marketing schemes are crimes. I expect more enforcement, and so does the American people. I expect the FTC to refer cases to the Department of Justice and collaborate with states for criminal prosecutions. For these criminals, only prison time will act as a deterrent. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses about what else can be done and should be done to protect consumers, and I look forward to collaborating with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to stop price gouging, hold online marketplace scammers accountable, and ensure that our laws are enforced. Thank you again to the ranking member, and I turn to her.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for the work, and I thank your staff for the work. I appreciate that our staffs are able to work together so well on not only this issue, but other issues that our subcommittee is addressing. And it is important to bring some oversight to scams that consumers have faced. It's absolutely essential that the federal government work with our state partners to crack down on bad actors who threaten the livelihood of some of the most vulnerable Americans. Fraudsters have gotten quite creative with their schemes during the pandemic. I think we've all been a little bit amazed with some of what we've discovered that they are doing, whether it's through taking advantage of elderly citizens or advertising and selling products with false medical claims. Scammers have disrupted the lives of millions of Americans. And you mentioned the $700 million that is the cost that the FTC estimates has come to consumers. $700 million. It is unacceptable. Fortunately, our states have leaders like my state of Tennessee, our Attorney General, Herbert Slattery, They've taken a leading role in shutting down these scammers. In the first consumer action brought by any state attorney general office in response to COVID-19, Tennessee closed down a price gouging operation involving two brothers that deprived rural East Tennessee and Eastern Kentucky of hand sanitizer. Thankfully, AG Slattery was able to resolve the matter quickly, and the brothers agreed to donate the supplies to a nonprofit organization in Tennessee. State attorneys general know their consumers best, and that's why I believe they are so well suited to lead this fight and to be there on the front lines. In 2020, another Tennessee company was making allegedly deceptive and misleading claims related to its cleaning products and services. The company claimed its products and services were FDA and EPA approved and could eliminate COVID-19 and protect against the virus on surfaces for up to 30 days. The company also presented the logos of major companies on their website, even though most of the companies confirmed they had never worked with the company or approved the use of their logo. Following a letter from AG Slattery in May of 2020, the company continued to imply that its products and services could protect against COVID-19. In November 2020, Attorney General Slattery announced a settlement with the company and prevented them from making any further deceptive or misleading claims that products or their services were effective against COVID-19. Individual consumers weren't the only victims of fraudsters. The federal government has been defrauded in countless instances. The Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program has saved thousands of small businesses and kept hundreds of thousands of people on the payroll. However, scammers immediately took advantage of these programs when the SBA was forced to screen applicants and approve loans quickly. According to an ABC News report dating back to last August, SBA's Inspector General, Mike Ware, estimated that 5% of transactions were fraudulent, a stunning rate that would suggest tens of billions of dollars have been lost. I'd like to point out one last thing before the witnesses give their opening remarks, and we do thank the witnesses for joining us today and for their patience with our tardiness in beginning the hearing. It's important to note that an unprecedented amount of counterfeit PPE continues to come through our nation's ports. Not surprisingly, countless amounts of these fake masks and test kits come from China. Tomorrow, this committee is scheduled to vote on the nomination of Mary Boyle to be a commissioner of the Consumer Product Safety Council, the CPSC. Now, according to a USA Today report in July of 21, Ms. Boyle was a leader in last year's decision to pull inspectors from the ports. Ms. Boyle, who agreed to pull port inspectors during private conversations in March of 2020, told commissioners, and I quote her, that the agency could chase problem products later through recalls, end quote. That is a very troubling statement, very troubling, because by that time, the counterfeit products are there. People have had tests that did not deliver accurate results. They have used PPE that is counterfeit and not effective. So I highly recommend to the White House that they pull the nomination of Ms. Boyle and that they put forward a candidate with a more proven background. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the hearing.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. Senator Wicker, I don't know whether you have an opening statement.
I do have a brief opening statement, Mr. Chairman, and I do thank
Please go ahead.
And thanks to both of you for your leadership on this issue and for convening this very important hearing on protecting the public from COVID-19 scams and price gouging. As COVID-19 virus continues to impact the United States, fraudsters and cyber criminals have continued exploiting the pandemic to take advantage of consumers. These bad actors have employed myriad scams to steal money from Americans, including email phishing schemes, government imposter scams, price gouging, identity theft, and more. Last month, the FTC calculated that these scams have cost Americans over $600 million, perhaps more. To protect consumers from such illicit activities, Congress can and should move to clarify the FTC's authority to empower the agency to punish and enjoin fraudulent or improper behavior and quickly see that victims are compensated for their losses. Congress should also give the FTC clear authority to go after bad actors exploiting the supply chain crisis and surging inflation to gouge consumers. I think there's a real opportunity to craft legislation to clarify the FTC's authority to protect consumers from price gouging and assist state attorneys general in combating this illegal practice. However, this effort should not distract from addressing the reckless policies that have caused the price of goods to spike and brought about the highest inflation numbers in 40 years. Finally, these COVID-related scams further underscore the need for uniform national privacy legislation to protect consumers from identity thieves and other misuse of their personal information. The subcommittee addressed this topic about 10 months ago, as the chairman has already stated. Today's hearing presents an opportunity to learn more about the efforts of the FTC, state and local governments, and the private sector to protect consumers from COVID-19 scams. So I thank the witnesses for their patience and for their testimonies, and I thank Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn for holding this important hearing, and I yield.
I will turn to the chair of the Commerce Committee, Senator Cantwell, if she has any opening.
Thank you,
more.
Chair Blumenthal, and hearing, join my colleague, the ranking member, Senator Wicker, and being here for this important hearing and the witnesses today. Since the onset of the pandemic, consumers across the country have been victimized by a range of scams related to COVID-19, including fake COVID-19 tests, cures, price gouging, phishing scams. And these are more than just an annoyance. They put the lives of individuals really at risk. So I am sad to see in the Seattle Times today a headline, COVID testing company fake test results lied to patients, and that our Attorney General in the state of Washington is following suit. The lawsuit, which was filed yesterday, describes how an Illinois-based company with at least 13 COVID-19 testing sites operating in Washington took advantage of Washington residents and consumers, some in other parts of the country as well, at a time when the Omicron infections were rising at a skyrocketing rate. Consumers complained that they did not get test results, that there were reports that companies stuffed tests into trash bags. Reports also surfaced that employees did not wear protective gear or masks or gloves. And one resident particularly worried because he had provided a copy of his driver's license and insurance card with obviously important personal information. Another resident visited the site, was uneasy from the start when she entered a makeshift storefront to find an empty office except for 2 folding chairs, and was then still waiting to hear about her test results. So I hope that the witnesses will be able to answer important questions for the record today. The alleged fraud has serious consequences, and I want to make sure that consumers in Washington have confidence to go get these tests and that these sites. So I hope that that the FTC will look into this matter. There are issues about whether the FTC will make sure the FTC has the proper authority. The FTC reports that since 2020, there have been nearly 300,000 reported instances of fraud, resulting in more than 669 million in total fraud losses. So I hope that the FTC responding by sending warning letters, but obviously we wanted and have sought for much quicker action on that. The commission needs to take stronger tools to find companies who peddle fake treatment and cures and who endanger the public. So I'll look forward, Mr. Chairman, to have comments from our witnesses on that. We passed the Consumer Protection Act, and Senators Wicker and I were sponsors of that, yet the FTC only has brought 3 civil penalty cases with this authority. So we want a strong FTC pursuing these cases about misperceptions, fraudulent activity as it relates to consumers in the time of a COVID crisis. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Cantwell, and thanks for your support in the work of our subcommittee, and most especially your work on the December 2020 law that strengthened the FTC in giving them additional tools on this topic. And I want to join in thanking the witnesses for their patience. We have ongoing votes, as you know, and we're going to be moving in and out, but we were late starting because of those votes, and we appreciate your staying with us. Let me introduce the witnesses. Mr. Samuel Levine is the director of the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Mr. Levine previously served as attorney advisor for Commissioner Rohit Chopra and as a staff attorney in the FTC's Chicago office. Teresa Murray is the director of the Consumer Watchdog Office at the United States Public Interest Research Group, which looks out for consumers' health, safety, and financial security. Previously, Ms. Murray worked as a journalist and columnist covering consumer issues and personal finance for 2 decades in Ohio. Ms. Mary Engel is the Executive Vice President of Policy at the Better Business Bureau, National Programs. Prior to joining BBB, Ms. Engel directed the FTC's Division of Advertising Practices, enforcing truth in advertising principles for national advertising matters. And Mr. Todd Leatherman. Mr. Leatherman is the Program Counsel of the National Attorneys General Training and Research Institute for the National Association of Attorneys General, NAG. Before joining NAG, Mr. Leatherman worked for 23 years with the Kentucky Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection. Mr. Levine, we'll begin with your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator, and good afternoon. My name is Samuel Levine, and I'm the director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection. I'm pleased to be speaking to you today about the FTC's comprehensive work to detect, deter, and halt COVID-related fraud. My written statement represents the views of the Commission, but this opening statement represents my views alone. The global pandemic has caused unimaginable suffering for millions of Americans, but it's created rich opportunities for scammers. At the FTC, thanks to the new tools and resources Congress gave us to fight COVID fraud, we're pursuing a comprehensive strategy to combat this scourge. First, we are carefully monitoring fraudulent claims. We work tirelessly to review thousands of complaints submitted to our Sentinel database, and we monitor social media and other platforms, which have become fertile ground for fraud. In addition, we analyze the complaints we receive from the public to spot emerging trends and guide our enforcement strategy. Second, we are using new authorities granted by Congress to target the worst forms of COVID abuse. Thanks in part to the COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act, we've been able to take down hundreds of fraudulent claims through cease and desist demands, and we've brought lawsuits to permanently shut down the worst offenders. But there is more work to do. We recognize that removing claims quickly from the marketplace does not help those who have already been victimized by these scams, and we will bring more cases to help ensure that consumers can be made whole. We're also making unprecedented investments in consumer education, and we're reaching out to communities across the country to spread the word about avoiding fraud. Unfortunately, the impacts of the pandemic on the marketplace have been so pervasive that case-by-case enforcement and education is simply not enough. That is why we are also taking steps to deter fraud market-wide, particularly by triggering civil penalty liability. Over the last year, we initiated a rulemaking to combat government and impersonation fraud. We revived our penalty offense authority to crack down on false earnings and health claims, and we worked with the CFPB to deter landlords from violating the CDC's eviction ban. We also protected consumers looking to buy products made in America, formally outlawing the practice of slapping Made in America labels on imported goods. Finally, we issued a statement on criminal referrals, reaffirming that we would not hesitate to refer the most egregious frauds for criminal prosecution. I'm proud of the actions we're taking, but we do face significant headwinds. First, scammers now have a lethal weapon to aim at struggling Americans: social media. It's no longer the case that scammers need to cold call consumers or blast out fraudulent mailers to defraud the public. Now, they can use powerful tools built on secret surveillance of American consumers to target their prey with precision. The result is that social media platforms have become hotbeds for fraud. Last week, we released data showing that 1 in 4 people who reported losing money to fraud in 2021 said that the con started on social media. And the number of consumers who reported losing money to these scams has gone up 19-fold since 2017. This surge is exactly why the Commission is pursuing a strategy to effectuate deterrence market-wide. But this battle remains uphill so long as digital platforms continue to wash their hands of responsibility for the fraud they are facilitating. Our second major challenge stems from the Supreme Court's decision in AMG, which stripped the FTC of its most powerful authority, Section 13B, to redress consumers and hold bad actors accountable. During the 5 years before the decision was issued, FTC law enforcement actions resulted in the return of more than $11 billion to injured consumers. But the AMG case means that many lawbreakers are now able to pocket their profits with impunity. We are grateful for everything Congress is doing to try to restore this vital tool, and we stand ready to assist in any way we can. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Levine. We will now hear from, in succession, Ms. Murray, then Ms. Engel, and Todd Leatherman. I'm going to be voting, but I've read your testimony, so I will be back to ask questions by the time you're done with your testimony. And in the meantime, Senator Blackburn will preside. Thank you. Ms. Murray, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Blackburn, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Teresa Murray, Director of the Consumer Watchdog Program with U.S. Public Interest Research Group. We are an independent, nonpartisan group that works for consumers and for the public interest. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about 2 big challenges consumers have faced during the pandemic: counterfeit products and price gouging. Counterfeit or substandard products started infecting the marketplace in February of 2020. We saw massive amounts of substandard and even dangerous hand sanitizer filling store shelves and retailers' websites. People were terrified and desperate and bought almost anything to protect themselves. Some hand sanitizer actually contained methanol or other toxic substances. Since July of 2020, the FDA has recalled 273 brands of hand sanitizer because they were dangerous or ineffective. And a year ago, it issued an import alert on hand sanitizers from Mexico. And this is still a problem. The most recent recommended product recall was 2 weeks ago. Many COVID-related products are counterfeit or don't do what they claim. We appreciate the work the FTC has done to try and keep us safe, but recently we've seen a surge in counterfeit masks. During 2020 and 2021, Customs and Border Protection seized some 34 million counterfeit masks, half from China. We know some counterfeits slipped through. The CDC found that 60% of KN95 masks sold in the US during 2020 and 2021 did not meet safety standards. Counterfeit masks have been a particular problem the last couple of months as Omicron surged. The biggest issue with substandard masks is consumers and healthcare workers think they're protected, but they aren't. We're also seeing fake COVID test sites. The sites look real with people in hazmat suits. You may get charged for a test that's supposed to be free, or your information is used to steal your identity, and oh, you don't get test results. The FTC is also seeing a surge in unauthorized home COVID tests, fueled by the test shortage. Senators Blumenthal and Markey asked the FTC to investigate fraudulent tests and price gouging of home tests. This can't happen quickly enough. Price gouging also started early in the pandemic. In spring 2020, US PIRG researched 90 types of face masks and hand sanitizers on Amazon. We found price increases of at least 50% on more than half the products compared with 3 months earlier. In January 2021, we researched 750 products such as face masks and cough syrup. And for each, we looked at the price in December 2019 and in December 2020. And out of the 750 listings on Amazon, 409 saw price increases of more than 20%, and 136 at least doubled in price. Recently, we've seen huge price spikes on home tests and N95 and KN95 masks. For example, 90 days ago, a 2-pack of on-go home tests was selling for an average of $29.07 on Amazon, but at least one Amazon seller offered it for $39.99. Also Saturday, I pulled up the top 3 listings on Amazon for N95 masks. One brand is Ben Hall. The 20-pack was selling for $16.78 2 months ago, and then health officials recommended higher quality masks. So 17 days ago, this same box of Ben Hall masks was selling for as much as $69.98. How is this acceptable? In a 2020 letter to PIRG, Amazon vowed to do more to get rid of exorbitant prices. It's not working, and it's not just Amazon. In conclusion, our recommendations are Customs and Border Protection must do more to stop counterfeit products from entering the U.S. Regulators should proactively investigate what's for sale in stores and online, including products that falsely offer miracle cures. State attorneys general should aggressively investigate price gouging. 37 states have price gouging laws, but it's a patchwork of confusion and inconsistency. We need meaningful price gouging legislation in every state and at the federal level. Congress should pass the Bipartisan Inform Act to help squash the sale of counterfeits. Businesses should not sell substandard products. Social media platforms should eliminate harmful content and advertising, including false promises of miracle cures. Congress should give the FDA more authority to crack down on and punish mask counterfeiters. The Bipartisan Protecting Patients from Counterfeit Medical Devices Act could help. We all need to do better. We all need to do more. Thank you again for the opportunity to address this committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Ms. Engel?
Engel, I'm sorry. You got it? Is it? Okay, thanks. Ranking Member Blackburn, I am Mary Engel, Executive Vice President Policy at BBB National Programs, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing marketplace trust through independent industry self-regulation programs. I previously worked at the Federal Trade Commission for 30 years, with the last 18 spent heading up the Division of Advertising Practices in the Bureau of Consumer Protection. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on how independent industry self-regulation has helped to combat COVID-19 fraud. BBB National Programs was created in 2019 out of the reorganization of the Council of Better Business Bureaus into 2 separate entities, BBB National Programs and the International Association of the Better Business Bureaus, which is the umbrella organization for the local BBBs. BBB National Programs operates more than a dozen national industry self-regulation and accountability programs in the areas of advertising, child-directed marketing, privacy, and dispute resolution. Today, I'll focus on the work of 2 of our programs, the Direct Selling Self-Regulatory Council, or DSSRC, and the National Advertising Division, or NAD, which both have addressed COVID-19 scams since the pandemic began. Launched in 2019, the DSSRC monitors product and business opportunity claims made by direct selling companies and their sales force members and facilitates the voluntary removal of misleading claims from the marketplace. The NAD has provided a voluntary self-regulatory forum for challenging misleading advertising since 1971. NAD promotes fair competition and builds public trust in advertising by reviewing misleading advertising claims based on competitor challenges and through its own monitoring. When a company doesn't participate or comply with a DSSRC or NAD recommendation, we refer the advertiser to the appropriate regulatory authority, usually the FTC. When COVID-19 shut down the world, some advertisers began touting untested cures, treatments, and preventatives. The DSSRC and NAD promptly took action against those claims. In April 2020, the Direct Selling Association and DSSRC issued a joint press release cautioning direct selling companies and their Salesforce members from making claims referencing COVID-19 in the context of product benefits and business opportunities. In addition, DSSRC reminded all direct selling companies to educate their Salesforce members about best practices with respect to health-related claims. Since the onset of the pandemic, DSSRC has commenced 139 inquiries involving claims pertaining to COVID. Those inquiries included 309 product performance claims and 33 claims discussing the pandemic as an earnings opportunity. In almost all the inquiries, the parties took prompt action to remove references to the coronavirus. In the 7 cases where that did not happen, we referred the cases to the FTC or the appropriate state attorney general. DSSRC currently has 5 cases pending involving COVID-19 claims. Our National Advertising Division has also brought cases challenging COVID claims. One of the benefits of NAD case decisions is their ability to educate other marketers, as they can expand upon FTC guidance by showing specific examples of how advertising can imply, without stating expressly, that a product is effective against COVID-19. A good example is the NAD case involving advertising claims for your Superfoods Immunity Boosting Bundle dietary supplements. In that matter, the advertiser said things like, with all that's going on with the coronavirus, there is a piece we can control, and that is our own health and building our immune system because it depends on what we eat. It's super important to have a lot of micronutrients now, so superfoods can help. We have this amazing immunity bundle. Following NAD's inquiry, the advertiser immediately agreed to remove the claims from the marketplace. A case concerning an elderberry supplement advertised to support the immune system provides another example. NAD reviewed the claim. As restrictions are gradually lifting, it's more important than ever to keep your immune system strong. Our elderberry immune support keeps you protected with a powerful immune-boosting combo. NAD found that this claim conveyed the implied message that the product protects against COVID. The advertiser voluntarily removed the misleading advertising from YouTube and elsewhere. NAD's COVID decisions have reached other industries as well, from cleaning products to ultraviolet lights to intravenous hydration therapy and continuously self-cleaning surfaces. Thank you for the opportunity to explain how independent industry self-regulation has helped combat deceptive COVID claims. Although some companies will respond only to government enforcement, many other marketers respond voluntarily to remove misleading advertising when given concrete guidance on appropriate claims. Independent industry self-regulation thereby amplifies the impact of government actions to reduce harm to consumers. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Engel. Mr. Leatherman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member Blackburn, and thank you, Chairman Blumenthal and members of the subcommittee. My name is Todd Leatherman, and I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. I currently serve as Program Counsel at the National Association of Attorneys General, or NAG, which is the nonpartisan national forum for America's 56 state and territory attorneys general. NAG provides training and resources to support attorneys general in protecting the rule of law in the United States Constitution. Prior to joining NAG, I spent 23 years in the Kentucky AG's Office of Consumer Protection, serving as Consumer Protection Chief for 20 of those years, focusing on a wide range of consumer protection issues, including price gouging and disaster scams. In my current role, I provide support and training for the consumer protection divisions of AG offices who, along with federal counterparts at the FTC, CFPB, DOJ, Secret Service, and others, are on the front lines fighting to protect U.S. consumers from deceptive business practices and scams. I've submitted written testimony and refer you to that for additional information that I'm unable to address in my time today. Attorneys general are the primary enforcers of consumer law within their jurisdictions, and through a combination of enforcement advocacy and education, they help protect consumers from a wide variety of deceptive business practices and scams. From the outset of the pandemic, consumers have been pitched phony cures, treatments, and products supposed to prevent COVID. They've been targeted by bogus testing sites, bombarded with scam telemarketing, phishing, and smishing scams, cloaked as contact tracing calls or testing companies, but which were in fact identity theft efforts. They've been sold counterfeit or knockoff N95 masks or other PPE that is not protective. Like many of us, consumers have been spending more time online and are being targeted by online scammers through online marketplaces, promising everything from PPE to puppies, but having no intention of actually delivering the goods. Attorneys general on all sides of the political spectrum have taken on scams like these, as well as practices by legitimate businesses that have harmed consumers, including recovering many millions of dollars wrongfully retained by entertainment event ticket sellers and vacation travel companies following pandemic-related cancellations. In addition, attorneys general have taken on price gouging, which is when a merchant charges prices for essential consumer goods and services during a declared state of emergency to such a high level that it takes unfair advantage of consumers. While merchants can pass on their own increased cost to consumers, they may not increase prices simply to make a profit following a spike in demand for an essential good or service, like bottled water or gasoline after a major weather disaster, or hand sanitizers or masks during the pandemic. 39 states and several of the territories have price gouging statutes, which are enforced by the AGs. Attorneys general are vigilant when it comes to price gouging and active in enforcing these laws. On the consumer education front, the AGs have continued to provide vital consumer alerts to warn consumers about the latest scams, as well as to put unscrupulous businesses on notice that ignoring the law will result in enforcement action. NAG has been coordinating with the FTC in providing timely public alerts and educational materials, alerting consumers regarding emergent scams and tips on how to avoid them. Another consequence of the pandemic is that we are all spending increasing amounts of time online, and as you would expect, so are scammers. Impersonator scams are a huge problem. According to the FTC, one type of impersonator scam, the romance scam, is one of the fastest growing scams in the US and resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in losses over the last 2 years. NAG is hosting a public webinar on Valentine's Day with members of the FBI, Commodities Futures Trading Commission, AARP, and the dating site company Match Group to provide information about this financially and often emotionally devastating crime. In closing, I'd like to voice my appreciation once again to Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Blackburn, and the entire subcommittee for holding today's hearing. Keeping consumers safe is a team effort, and I applaud your effort on educating the public and urge you to continue using your platform to grow awareness among your constituents and consumers across the nation on how to identify, avoid, and report scams and fraud. As you all have said, there is much work to do, and the attorneys general are ready to do the work and continue the work in protecting consumers. I look forward to your questions today and working with the subcommittee on keeping consumers safe in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Leatherman. I'm going to begin the questioning with you, Mr. Levine. You mentioned in your remarks that the FTC has sent letters directing more than 425 companies to remove deceptive claims. In what proportion of those cases have the claims been removed?
Thank you, Senator. The overwhelming majority of recipients of those cease and desist demands take down their claims and often take them down within 48 hours.
And then bring new ones?
Well, Senator, we monitor these closely. If we see them bringing new claims, we will not hesitate to take them to court.
But you've brought only 3 cases under the COVID-related Consumer Protection Act.
I completely agree, Senator, that we need to bring more cases, and we will be bringing more cases. It's certainly important that we get these claims taken down quickly, but it's also critical that we not allow scammers to profit from preying on American consumers. And if that means taking them to court, that's exactly what we're going to do.
You know, I've sat at this dais for years now, and I've heard the same thing said, as you've said, I'm sure in good faith, but we continue to have warning letters without real apparent effect. Are you obligated to bring warning letters before you bring lawsuits?
We are not obligated, Senator, particularly early on in the pandemic. We wanted to make sure these claims got taken down quickly to prevent further harm to consumers. But I think we're now at the point where we don't only want to get these claims taken down, we want to make sure scammers out there know that they're going to pay a heavy price, not only pay back what they stole, but pay a penalty to the government as punishment. And that's why we're going to bring more cases.
How many penalties have been paid as a result of the 3 cases that you brought?
I could get that exact figure, Senator. I know some of those cases remain in litigation.
So in effect, there have been few, if any, penalties actually paid.
I think in addition to the 3 cases under the CCPA, Senator, we brought about 15 other COVID-related cases under other authorities, and there may be penalty liability there as well.
What changes have you made to deter these criminals from price gouging and scamming and deceptive and misleading practices that you have the authority to go to court on without warning letters, but evidently continue issuing warning letters?
I think the big change we're making is trying to make sure that there's civil penalty liability across the market. So those cease and desist demands and warning letters do give us a basis to seek civil penalties against COVID scammers, but we're also sending notices of penalty offenses for other types of scams not covered by the CCPA to make sure that those scammers pay a penalty. Same with our Made in USA fraud rule. We want to make sure those scammers pay a penalty. There are a lot of people using this pandemic as a basis to prey on American consumers, and we want to make sure everyone pays a price and know they're going to pay a price if they persist in their wrongdoing.
I appreciate your words, but what the con artists and scammers understand is action.
I agree.
Actions speak louder than words. So far, there's been no action. More important, there have been no penalties. There's no deterrence if there are no penalties. And there's no real deterrence unless there are penalties that have real bite. And so far, there has been a complete dearth of action. We've given you new authority, and I am at a loss to understand why the FTC hasn't taken stronger action. I understand that some of your testimony may be on your own or on your own without the authority of the FTC, but let me ask you, as someone with a lot of experience in this area, how do you go to work knowing that this agency has apparently no clear strategy articulated by the agency itself for changing its practice to bring more cases without warnings? Forget the warnings.
I think our strategy, Senator, is going to be to bring more cases. As I said, I think we're now at the stage in the pandemic where we're moving away from trying to get these claims taken down as quickly as possible. Obviously, we want them taken down as quickly as possible, but we also need to make sure that these scammers are paying a heavy penalty for preying on people. And as I said, we're not just going to ask people to turn over what they stole. We're going to ask them to pay a civil penalty to the government, and when appropriate, we're going to make a criminal referral so that, because some of these people deserve jail time.
Are they under an obligation to take down a deceptive, misleading scam simply because you've issued a warning letter?
If they don't, we're going to take them to court. So yes.
So why not just take them to court? They'll take it down anyway.
Some of them we are going to take to court. Part of it is trying to get these claims taken down as quickly as possible. But I hear what you're saying, Senator. It's not only that these scammers pay a price. Consumers who lose money to these scams should be made whole. And to do that, we need to bring lawsuits, and that's what we're going to do.
To make them whole, you need to bring lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
But also, to prevent them in the future, you need to bring lawsuits with a remedy of penalties and injunctive relief. So that if they violate a court order, the court itself will exact penalty.
We want to obtain permanent injunctions against these scammers that put them under court order for the rest of their lives. That's what many of these scammers deserve, and that's what we're going to be seeking in court.
Well, I'm not from Missouri, but I am in a show-me state of mind. The ranking member is recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levine, I do appreciate that you mentioned that most of these things have started online. Mr. Leatherman, I want to come to you first because in Tennessee, we have seen a preponderance of these online scams that have kicked up in the prevalence of that. And in my opinion, the state's attorneys general are in the best spot to deal with this. And as you well know, Tennessee has been very active. And AG Slattery's been very active in pursuing these cases against fraudsters in this space. And what I'd like to know from you, recognizing that the state is in a better position to go after this than the federal government, are there any barriers or hurdles that the state AGs are facing in this fight against these online scammers? And we know that we want our state AGs to be as well equipped as possible. So any barriers or hurdles?
I appreciate the question, Ranking Member Blackburn. And as you know, Attorney General Slattery, but also many other attorneys general have been very active in pursuing not only price gouging cases, but also counterfeit PPE cases and also bogus cure cases. And you are correct that, and as has been mentioned by others, there's a lot of activity that is going on online. I would say that as a legal matter, the state AGs do have, are replete with authority under their UDAP cases, as well as price gouging cases in order to pursue these cases. The barriers or the challenges are those related to the volume of the activity that is going on. Obviously, AG offices have limited resources, and so being able to address all these issues is a challenge. We are not here with hat in hand asking for additional resources, but obviously, if the federal government
Let
is
me
interested in
just
providing,
jump in there. So really, there are no legal barriers. You have the authority that the attorneys general have the needed authority, correct?
that is correct.
Okay.
Ranking Member.
And just, it's always a resourcing issue. So I appreciate that. Ms. Engel, let me come to you. I want to be sure I understood 2019, pre-pandemic, is when the Direct Selling Association started their self-regulatory council there at the BBB National Program, correct?
That's correct. It
Okay.
was created in 2019.
I think that that is significant, and we know that you have used it to monitor the marketplace. So talk with me just a touch about the program's impact and what needs to happen to ensure that these self-regulatory bodies can be successful.
Sure. So, the impact of this program in the area of COVID has been the removal of over 400 misleading claims from the marketplace, from the direct selling marketplace specifically. And it is true that most of these claims appear on social media. And so we actively monitor social media in order to find those claims and contact the company.
How large is the staff that monitors this?
We have a handful of staff, but we have a contract with a web crawler type of company that does the actual
absolutely.
monitoring. Yeah.
Okay, that is helpful. Ms. Murray, I want to come to you. CBP and at the port in LA and Long Beach, they intercepted 13,586 counterfeit products. in 2021, and it was a 153% increase from 2020. So you touched on it in your remarks, but a more fulsome response on what we can do to fight these overseas entities that are flooding our ports and flooding our country with fake and counterfeit items. This is dangerous for our citizens, and we know most of this is, of course, coming from China.
Yes, thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my remarks, during 2020 and 2021, Customs and Border Protection actually seized 34 million counterfeit masks during that time. And of course, the ports in Los Angeles and Houston and on the East Coast, I mean, all of them have seen this just monstrous increase in fake PPE. I think what we need to see is more resources as well as more cooperation. The things that scare me is we hear about the cases where the FBI was involved in this case and Border Patrol seized this many masks or this many fake COVID tests. But what about the ones we don't hear about? What about the ones that are actually ending up on store shelves or online or in hospitals? Because there were a number of cases last year where hospitals, including the Cleveland Clinic here in Ohio, as well as hospitals in Minnesota and New Jersey, all across the country, where hospitals actually had distributed what turned out to be counterfeit 3M N95 masks. And how do we stop that from I mean, that's awful to think that we had our frontline workers running around for hours or days or weeks with fake masks. And so we absolutely need to have more resources to stop that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see that Senator Klobuchar has joined us remotely, and she is recognized.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chairman Blumenthal, and thank you also, Senator Blackburn, for holding this important hearing. I appreciate it. I was listening in, Ms. Murray, as you talked about the fake masks, and 3M is, of course, a Minnesota company, so it even hits harder home that someone was ripping off their masks and distributing them to our frontline workers. Also, last week, our Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, filed a lawsuit in state court against 2 COVID testing companies for falsifying test results. And I think going after these cases is really, really important. One thing that I wanted to mention was just the work that we can do federally. I have proposed legislation with Senator Grassley that would change the way the merger fees are done so that we could get more money into the FTC as well as to the Department of Justice to help them with their annual budgets. Mr. Levine, what would the effect be of tripling actually the FTC's budget, which is part of another bill that I've introduced, have on the agency's ability to better protect consumers? And by the way, there's ways we can do this, as Senator Grassley and I pointed out, from our merger fee bill without putting it on the back of taxpayers. And I think there's also an argument that the cases, because there's so much rampant scams going on, actually bring in money for the government if done right, but not if they don't have the funding to start the cases to begin with. Mr. Levine, do you want to answer that?
Certainly, Senator, and thank you for the question. In short, the effect would be transformative. I mean, a striking fact about FTC funding, we actually have a smaller headcount today than we did in 1980 when the economy was far smaller. With more resources, we could bring more cases and return more money to more consumers. In the 5 years before the Supreme Court took away our strongest authority, Section 13B, we returned more than $11 billion to consumers, far more than we received in federal funding. Investing in the FTC is a good investment.
Exactly. You bring in money. And Ms. Murray, you also highlighted the chronically underfunded agency. How will more funding directly benefit customers from your perspective?
To the extent that the federal agencies have more resources, they can improve their technology, they can improve their staffing, they can improve their training. All of those are needed to help consumers because consumers can't do it alone.
Right. Another thing, social media platforms, as you all know, are designed to amplify content. And sadly, if not monitored, it actually makes it easier for scammers to spread content that's false. And Mr. Levine, in your testimony, you note how since 2017, reports of scams starting on social media have increased 19-fold. Can you tell us about some of the most prevalent scams? And then maybe Ms. Engel, could you also touch on this, what you think should happen? Mr. Levine.
Absolutely, Senator. The numbers are quite striking. Not only a 17-fold increase in the volume of losses on social media, a 19-fold increase in the number of people reporting losses, 95,000 complaints last year, $770 million in losses reported last year, and we know that's the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing particular rise in investment scams, romance scams, online shoppings, and other frauds. And simply put, Senator, online platforms are not doing enough to police this problem.
Yep, very good. Ms. Engel, would you like to add what the platform should be doing to make sure these scams aren't put forward in the first place?
In addition to being vigilant, I mean, one of the things that we would like them to do is to partner with us so that when we see misleading ads on their platforms and the advertiser doesn't comply with our decision, we could refer them to the platforms. Facebook actually has already agreed to do that. And so when we refer matters to them, the misleading ads violate their terms of service and they promptly take them down. And we would like to have that same partnership with the other platforms as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, very good. I think there's also some other proposals out there. I think that would be very helpful on everything from algorithms to assessing financial fees, taxes on this, to changes to immunity for misrepresentation. It's one thing if someone puts a false comment on, it's another when a platform actually amplifies the misinformation and is making money off of it. To me, that's the distinguishing factor. If you're going to look at immunity issues, or you're going to look at taxation, or you're going to look at anything to try to get a handle on this, because there's got to be more incentives for good behavior and disincentives in place than we see right now. So thank you very much.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Massachusetts is seeing encouraging decreases in COVID-19, but we know that reliable at-home test kits will continue to be an important tool to keep our communities healthy. At-home testing kits are vital for identifying illnesses and stopping the spread of COVID-19. Unfortunately, we know that during periods of increased demand for tests, bad actors have engaged in predatory and profiteering behavior, including selling fraudulent test kits and charging exorbitant prices. Ms. Murray, can you briefly describe the types of fraudulent activity related to COVID testing that threaten consumers in this country?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And I assume that by testing, you're talking about like the test sites as well as the test kits that people can buy in stores. And, you know, I mean, I've focused on consumer issues for 30 years. I was a consumer finance journalist in my past life. And just when you think you've heard it all, predatory lending, phone calls that grandkids are in jail and they need iTunes gift cards for bail money, just when you think you've heard it all, then all of a sudden you get COVID coming along. And we've had so much of unauthorized test kits, counterfeit masks, fake test sites, and these miracle cures that don't work.
So what should we do? What is the solution to this? We know it's out there. We know it's rampant. What is the plan we should put in place?
We need more resources, more enforcement. Frankly, I would like to see we need more supply, okay? And I would like to see more aggressive enforcement.
I'm sorry, we need more supply of what? We need more supply of what?
Of test kits and of the test sites. I mean,
how do we make sure that those that are there are not fraudulent? We know that 60% of the masks coming in from China are fraudulent. So what can we do in order to, police that?
Well, with the test kits, there is a site that you can go on with the FDA to make sure that the test kits are valid. But really, I mean, are consumers going to be able to look either at the grocery store, they finally found some test kits for sale, and they're going to pull it up on their phone to see whether it's legitimate or not? I think the retailers have more responsibility to make sure that the products that they're getting in their stores are actually authorized. And with these test sites, what I was starting to say is I would like to see a little bit more of the mindset of see something, say something. I mean, I wonder with some of these pop-up test sites that have opened up in shopping center plazas, if somebody just was able to call their local police department and say, hey, can you go out and check out what this thing is? Because, you know, people can just buy like orange cones and hazmat suits and go out and pretend to be a test site. We've heard just horrible, horrible cases with these fake test sites, and people are getting their information stolen, in some cases being asked to pay money for what should be a free test. Everybody
So,
needs to be more
Mr.
vigilant.
Levine, let me just say this to you, Mr. Levine. We got a big problem out here. Senator Blumenthal and I have written to the Federal Trade Commission asking for the toughest possible actions to be taken to deal with these scams. And I applaud the FTC for everything that they've done thus far. But we just want to make sure that we're working with you so that you have all of the authority which you need in order to um, uh, to police this area. And I guess I would just move over to masks quickly because they are an effective tool for reducing transmission, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently updated its masking guidance to acknowledge that higher quality masks provide better protection from COVID-19. Now more Americans are looking for increased protection that comes from N95, KF94s, and KN95 masks. Unfortunately, online marketplaces are rife with counterfeit and fraudulent masks, and those platforms continue to allow masks to be sold despite concerns that the information about these products is misleading and unverified. Last year, the Department of Justice established a COVID-19 fraud enforcement task force. Today, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Warren joined with me in writing to the Department of Justice, urging to take all steps necessary to protect consumers from the threat of fraudulent masks online in the marketplace. Ms. Murray, do you agree that this task force should prioritize efforts to protect consumers and promote public health by cracking down on fraudulent masks?
Absolutely. And one of the stunning things is some of these fake masks that have been tested by health officials, their filtration level is 7%.
So exactly. So we need some kind. What we need is this. We need a national ranking for masks, so that people know that a cloth mask on a scale of 10 is a 1 or a 2. That a surgical mask is only a 5 or a 6. And that you need those stronger masks to get up to an 8 or a 9 or a 10. So actually, the federal government has to do a better job in putting together a comprehensive a program. We actually, when people go and purchase their sunscreen, they know that it's what the SPR is, 36, 18. People know what it is for their own skin. Right now, it's incomprehensible to people in terms of what the rating system is for a mask. And the federal government, following what NIOSH does for their masks, has another counterpart. Is it the FDA? Some agency which is ranking all of these masks. And that will help the consumer to know what to buy. In the same way, when they buy a car, it's 5 stars, 4, 3, 2, and 1 for safety. We need some kind of system for masks because we might see this pandemic subsiding, but it's going to come back. And at that point, hopefully by then, we will have a ranking system. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just such an important hearing. It gets right to what the federal government should be taking as action to give more protections to consumers in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Markey, and thanks for mentioning the letter that we did today regarding fraudulent and fake masks and other scams. Very important that the Department of Justice takes responsibility here as well. Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levine, I recently introduced the Bipartisan Robocall Traceback Enhancement Act with Senator Markey to help bolster privately led efforts to trace back the origins of illegal robocalls. Can you speak to the FTC's efforts on engaging with industry initiatives like the Robocall Traceback Group and whether this public-private partnership has been successful in identifying illegal robocaller actions?
Absolutely, Senator. And first of all, thank you for your leadership on this issue and on the Trace Act as well. It has been a successful partnership, but let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot more work to be done. The FTC has brought 150 lawsuits. We're moving upstream, targeting VoIP providers. We're blasting billions of calls into Americans' homes and pockets, but a lot more needs to be done if we're going to take on this scourge.
Well, and I hope that you can continue to advise us, too, on things that we can do to give you more tools, but we do want to make sure that these partnerships that we've called for are hopefully functioning and working in an effective way. And I would follow up with Mr. Leatherman virtually, if you could elaborate on the coordination between industry and enforcement officials to make the trace back efforts effective, and then perhaps also address the question of whether there are other tools Congress should consider providing attorneys general to meet the challenge of tracking illegal robocallers. Mr. Leatherman?
I don't know whether we have Mr. Leatherman still.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. Mr.
Sorry
Leatherman,
about that.
did you hear the question?
I did not hear the question. My internet just blinked out. So would you repeat it, please?
I don't know if you heard my first question from Mr. Levine, but I wanted to ask if you could elaborate on the coordination between industry and enforcement officials to make the trace back efforts effective. This comes back to the issue of robocalls. And as a follow-up, are there other tools Congress should consider providing state attorneys general to meet the challenge of tackling illegal robocallers?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And thank you for your leadership on the issue involving robocalls. As you're aware, I think there's been a number of cases brought recently by state attorneys general using tools that have been made available through the Traceback Act, and those efforts are ongoing. There have been a number of cases brought recently targeting illegal activity conducted on networks, and so the networks themselves have been subject to law enforcement action. So in the past, it was difficult to obviously sue all of the scammers, and so the AGs have been very effective in targeting networks that are knowing
Mr. Leatherman, I think we've lost you again.
Yeah.
I think we've lost you.
Mr. Chairman, let me come back to Mr. Levine here. And this is a separate issue, but not has to do with a concern I've had for a long time about the big four meat packers' dominance and control over beef processing capacity and cattle supply in this country. Packers are enjoying excessive profits while cattle producers and family farm and ranch operations like those in my home state of South Dakota struggle to stay in business. At the same time, consumers are left paying record high prices for beef, and most of the time, they aren't even sure where it's coming from because of the product of the USA labeling loophole, which is entirely another issue. But I remain very concerned with potential improper or anti-competitive activity in the beef sector, and I'm encouraged that this administration has prioritized oversight of this highly concentrated industry, and I'm wondering what your views are with respect to the FTC using its Section 6B authority to investigate these meatpacking companies.
Well, Senator, I certainly share your interest in this issue. I'd want to raise that with my colleagues in the Bureau of Competition who'd have more knowledge on that particular issue. But I just want to jump off something you said about Product of USA beef. You know, one of the things we did at the FTC last year is finalize a rule that prohibits mislabeling products made in USA when they're from overseas. But as you referenced, Senator, we know that when Americans are shopping for beef, it might say Product of USA on the label, but that cattle could have been born, raised, and slaughtered overseas. This isn't only bad for consumers, this is bad for the ranchers in your state and across the country who are being cheated by misleading labels. We stand ready to work with the USDA on this issue to protect all consumers from misleading Product of USA or Made in USA labels.
Thank you, and I hope that you will take a look at the other issue that I mentioned on the FTC with respect to the concentration and dominance and control that a handful of meat packers have. But I appreciate you addressing the issue of labeling, because it is misleading to consumers in this country when product that comes in from outside the U.S. attracts the USA label, and it doesn't represent an animal that was born, raised, and harvested here in the United States. And so this is an issue that has been around for a long time. We've addressed it in a couple of farm bills. It continually gets challenged at the World Trade Organization, and we have not been willing to defend the legislation that has passed previously here in the Congress that would provide mandatory country of origin labeling. I'm glad that you all are moving forward to try and close that loophole. I hope that you will use the powers that your agency has and the authorities that it does to continue to try and tighten up so we can get to a point in this country where everything that we put in the center of our plate has the same requirements as the clothes we wear. There isn't your tie, my tie, it'll all say made in some other country. We've got labeling on everything except the stuff that we eat. It makes absolutely no sense. It's an issue that's just flat, has to be addressed. I've got a bill with Senator Tester to do that, but to the degree that you all have regulatory authority, I would encourage you to continue to exercise it in a way that allows American consumers to be able to differentiate when they go to the supermarket or the grocery store products that are born, raised, and harvested here in the United States and those that are not. I think it's an important distinction to be made and something that consumers around this country desperately want to see. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Thune, and I join completely in the views you've just expressed, and if you want to follow up with letters or legislation, I'd be very pleased to join you. This is an issue of consumer protection that is supremely important to our whole country, not just to your state and the ranchers and others there. I see we're joined by Senator Lee.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levine, I'd like to talk about 13B. You wrote in your testimony that in the context of 13B, quote, restoring the FTC's ability to provide redress to wronged consumers is critical, close quote. But of course, in the AMG case in which that ruling was issued, the court specifically noted that its decision did not prohibit the FTC from using its authority under Section 5 and under Section 19 to obtain redress for wronged consumers. Is the Supreme Court wrong? Under other existing authorities, are you unable to provide any redress for wronged consumers?
It's possible, Senator, but it's very difficult, and I'm happy to talk through why if that would be helpful.
Okay, well, I mean, it is pretty significant. I mean, there was a significant ruling. The ruling was significant on its face. It also happened to be unanimous. And what the unanimous court found in that case was that over 40 years, over a period of over 40 years, the FTC had been illegally obtaining money from companies. And we're not talking about some trivial sum. We're talking about billions of dollars. Now, I certainly want to ensure, as I know you do, that consumers who have been harmed can be made whole again. But I think we can't ignore what's happened. And I think it would be legislative malpractice on my part if I were to decide to jump on board with something that would grant the Commission the very same authority that the Commission used for 40 years, not only against bad actors, but also against lawful actors, against legal, non-predatory business practices that were providing legitimate goods and services. And so I think instead of just giving carte blanche authority, Congress should ensure that this authority is coupled with proper safeguards in order to block any future abuses of this immense power. Now, let me make sure I understand. Are you against any guardrails around 13B-like authority for the FTC?
I think the best guardrail for our 13B authority is the fact that the FTC can't order anybody to pay a nickel. We need a federal judge to order any payment. We needed that under 13B, and we need it under some of the legislation the Senate has considered.
Okay, so injunctive relief. You're saying that they need to be able to have injunctive relief, but they have injunctive relief. What other types of reforms would you be willing to support? What kinds of guardrails around the authority to do what the unanimous Supreme Court said they were unlawfully doing for 40 years in the MG case?
The biggest reform we need is the ability to return money to consumers, Senator, who have been scammed. You're right, there are other ways to do it. It'll take 5, 6 years, or it could take years. And by the time we actually get money back, by the time we actually get a judgment and we're through the appeals process, the defendant doesn't have any money anymore. The best way to stop fraud and get money back to consumers is restoring the authority we had.
Look, ensuring that consumers can be protected from scams and from unfair and deceptive business practices is extremely important. And we need to get this right when we do it. It is also important, not in spite of the fact that the aforementioned is important, but because it's important. It's also essential that we ensure that consumers continue to have access to goods and services provided by legitimate businesses. These two goals don't have to be at odds with one another. In fact, due process allows for them to be pursued effectively and simultaneously. In fact, that's what due process is. It's why we have it. It's why it's built into the Constitution, not just once, but twice. I believe Congress can grant the expansion of 13B authority while also providing appropriate safeguards, safeguards of the sort outlined in my proposed legislation, S 3410, which is called the Consumer Protection and Due Process Act. And it would protect consumers by, one, providing the FTC with the ability to pursue monetary equitable remedies as against bad actors, and two, providing businesses due process protections from improper, unfounded, and frivolous claims. Which leads to a concern that I've had. You know, under the COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act, the CCPA, it's illegal to engage in deceptive marketing related to the treatment, the cure, the prevention, the mitigation, or the diagnosis of COVID-19. Over the past years, the past 2 years, roughly, since that's been in place, many hardworking Americans have stepped up to the plate and have worked diligently to identify or create or develop inexpensive therapies and treatments against COVID-19. Lamentably, it seems that the federal government is keen on promoting only some solutions, while essentially blocking medical professionals from delivering other FDA-approved medications for the treatment of COVID, treatment options that are often far less expensive and far more available than the government-pushed approaches. And I find it quite concerning that this combination of the FTC, the FDA, and other entities seem to be trying to block the off-label use of approved drugs when it comes to tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. In some cases, it's off-label use of previously approved medication. In other cases, it's anything that looks like it might help relieve the symptoms of COVID or otherwise address COVID. And so, look, it's not illegal for healthcare providers, in their best judgment as medical professionals and with the health history and the best interests of their patients in mind, just prescribe off-label uses for approved drugs. You think this is a valid and important practice that's being hampered by the FTC and the FDA?
I think it depends on the circumstance, Senator. I can say that we certainly don't regulate the practice of medicine. And I think if you look at the cease and desist demands we've sent, the cases we've brought, frankly, Senator, these are not close calls. These are hucksters, these are fraudsters who are selling people snake oil. So I think some of the concerns you raise, I'm happy to...
So you're saying that you go only after those who are selling snake oil or the modern day equivalent. Mr. Chairman, I see my time's expired. I've got just one or two follow-up questions. I'll be fast. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We go after a wide range of COVID-related frauds.
You do.
And they're not close calls.
In your testimony, you mentioned that the first case that you filed under the CCPA was against a chiropractor due to claims about the use of vitamin D and zinc supplements to treat or prevent COVID-19. And in the complaint filed by the Commission for that very case, you noted that you would seek to bar health claims unless, quote, unless, and the following is a quote, true and can be substantiated by competent and reliable scientific evidence, close quote. How do you determine what meets that evidentiary standard, and by what process does the Commission make these determinations? What process does it follow to protect the rights of those who don't think they're selling snake oil?
The short answer, Senator, is that we have to persuade a federal judge. It's been the position of the FTC for decades that if you're going to make a health claim, there needs to be a reasonable basis for it, or else it's deceptive. But we can't just announce that.
And what guidance do you provide them about what's deceptive?
We've provided extensive guidance both through our casework and through our business guidance on ftc.gov around the types of bases we look for making medical claims. But again, if we're going into federal court alleging that a claim is unsubstantiated, we're only going to win if we can convince a federal judge.
Yeah, and therein lies the tie to what I'm describing about the need for due process. You have overwhelming power at your disposal. You have presumptions in the eyes of an entity that is staring down the barrel of your enforcement. It's not an even playing field when they walk into that court. The immense authority that you've got at your disposal within your discretion is itself looming, and it can and does shut businesses down entirely. Now, I understand that difficult line drawing problems inhere in the practice of government, but let's not pretend that this happens in a vacuum. And let's not pretend that this doesn't connect back to the need to protect due process and the need for there to be guardrails around 13B authority. So in light of that, I hope, expect, in fact, I demand that you reconsider any opposition you might otherwise have to having guardrails around 13B authority. We can protect consumers, and we must, but we've also got to provide American businesses, American consumers with due process protection. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Lee. I have just a few questions and then we'll end. I've heard from a lot of consumers who have been victims of these scams, and a lot of them on online marketplaces, as we have remarked throughout this hearing. Consumers who research sellers and attempted to authenticate these products, whether they're masks or supposed miracle cures, did their homework and still got scammed. So the question is, on online retailers and marketplaces, Mr. Levine, in your testimony, you mentioned enforcement action against online marketers who claimed to provide but failed to deliver face masks and other products. And you remarked that the online marketplaces should be more cooperative. I'm not quoting you directly. Amazon, Facebook, eBay, tell me whether they have been cooperative, and if not, why not?
I think, Senator, that they will refer us cases and we will let them know when we spot problems on their marketplaces. But I think here's the thing. If you're a consumer looking to buy an authentic mask, and we've brought lawsuits against sellers of N90, they claim it's an N95 mask and it's actually a cloth mask. It's crazy to me that 2 years into this pandemic, consumers still can't go on an e-commerce platform and have confidence that the mask they buy is authentic. Nobody, not e-commerce platforms and not the scammers, should be profiting from the sale of defective masks that are not only cheating consumers of money, but that are putting public health at risk. But unfortunately, that is exactly what is happening, and the platforms are not taking enough responsibility for the fraud they're facilitating.
Are they doing anything?
I think they're doing things around the edges, but at the end of the day, their business model does not give them an incentive to sufficiently police this problem.
They could scrutinize the sales of these products, correct?
Certainly, Senator, just like we do. We have people with the money Congress gave us monitoring these marketplaces all the time. And it raises the question why these marketplaces aren't doing more on their own to protect their own customers and the American public from the kinds of frauds that you and others on this subcommittee have talked about.
Tell me, why isn't the FTC taking action against the online marketplaces if they are failing to perform their responsibilities? At lack of authority?
I think a big problem, Senator, is that these marketplaces have disclaimed responsibility for any of the conduct on their marketplaces, invoking Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
Well, they've disclaimed responsibility, but can't they be held responsible?
It's certainly, it's going to depend on the facts, of course, Senator, but if you look at how some federal courts have interpreted the CDA, it's in fact quite broad. And what it means is that these platforms don't have a strong incentive to actually police their marketplaces, and we don't have strong tools.
Let me put it to you this way. I understand there may be an issue under Section 230. But why hasn't the FTC come to us and said, we need to hold these online marketplaces accountable because they are in effect complicit and we can't reach them?
I am here telling you just that, Senator.
That you're asking for authority?
We would
on behalf of the FTC.
We would be, well, I'm speaking for myself, but we would be
well, that's not, Mr. Levine, I really respect your impressive accomplishments as an enforcer, your personal career, but without it meaning any disrespect, we want you here speaking for the agency. We didn't invite you here as a private citizen. We didn't invite you, as a matter of fact. We invited the FTC. I want you to tell me that you want authority on behalf of your agency to effectively enforce the law.
I can't commit the commission to a position, but the commission would be happy to work with you as we have.
Well, I want you to work with me.
Happy to.
I want you to do more than just work with us, request the authority so we can have you here and say the FTC says it needs authority to go after these scammers and protect the public because the online marketers, in effect, are enabling and profiting from fraud. That's what's happening here.
I could not agree more, and like I said, we will certainly work with you on that.
And I appreciate your agreement.
Yes.
Believe me, don't misunderstand me. I appreciate your personal agreement, but we want the FTC to be on record as well.
Totally understood, Senator.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Levine, you mentioned in your testimony the work that the commission is doing to reach out to Latina consumers in Spanish language ads. And you mentioned the FTC versus Moda Latina BZ Inc. case. Have there been others like it, and what was that case about?
I could get you a list of all the cases, Senator. Moda Latina was an important case. It was COVID-related. The company was peddling money-making opportunities deceptively and cheating people out of a lot of funds. We actually issued a report in the fall called Serving Communities of Color, where we detailed our extensive enforcement work over the last 5 years to make sure that we're responding to consumer protection problems in every community, including for Latinos.
And you mentioned also immigrant communities. Does that report cover immigrant communities?
It does, Senator.
I want to just finish by asking a couple of questions. You noted in your testimony that the FTC requested data from social media and video streaming companies in December of 2020 about personal information collection use practices, stating, quote, "This study may provide critical information on the business practices at issue." What is intended by this study, and what kind of progress has been made on it?
A lot of progress has been made, Senator. As you can imagine, the document production has been quite voluminous. I think the key to this study, and it really relates to what we're talking about today, we know that scammers have a powerful new tool in social media to target consumers where it's going to hurt them the most. And what we want to do is we want to lift the hood, understand how these algorithms operate so that we can do the best do the best job we can do to protect consumers, and also report to Congress on our findings so that you can make a determination if legislation is needed.
And finally, you mentioned in your testimony that the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol needed to better act to prevent counterfeit masks and other counterfeit products from coming into the country. What more should they be doing?
I think the specific discussion of CBP might be elsewhere. What I will say, Senator, is that it could come into the country. The way it's actually getting into consumers' homes is through e-commerce marketplaces that, as I said, are not doing enough to police this problem. We can put all the people at our ports that we can. They're never going to catch everything. The real question to me is why these for-profit marketplaces can't do what the FTC is doing, making sure that fraudulent masks, defective masks aren't being sold and that they're not profiting from it.
That is a good way to end this hearing, even though it's a discouraging answer about online marketplaces. I think it should serve as a call to action, and I know that this committee will be further interested in taking action. So I want to really thank all of the witnesses for being here today. Your testimony has been very, very helpful and enlightening. This hearing record is going to remain open for 2 weeks. Any senators that want to submit questions for the record should do so by February 15th. We ask that responses be returned as quickly as possible, in no case later than 2 weeks after you receive the questions. And again, my thanks for your testimony, my thanks to everybody who's online or virtual, and that will conclude this hearing. Thank you very much.